Imagine a country, vibrant and full of promise, suddenly torn apart by conflict. This isn't a distant tale, it's the story of the Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafran War. It was a conflict that lasted from 1967 to 1970, leaving deep scars on the nation's soul. Today, we're going to explore what led to this war, what happened during those turbulent years, and the legacy it left behind. This is a story of identity, struggle, and the difficult path to reconciliation. To understand the war, we have to go back to Nigeria's independence from Britain in 1960. Nigeria is a vast country, home to over 250 different ethnic groups. The three largest are the House of Fulani in the north, the Yoruba in the southwest, and the Igbo in the southeast. When the British created the colony of Nigeria, they brought these diverse groups together under a single administration, but deep-seated cultural and political differences remained. The pre-war period was marked by growing political tension. The northern region, being the most populous, often dominated the federal government. This led to feelings of marginalization among other groups, particularly the Igbo, who had eagerly embraced Western education and held prominent positions in civil service and commerce across the country. The political climate was like a powder keg, and in January 1966, the first spark was lit. A group of army officers, mostly of Igbo origin, staged a military coup. They overthrew the civilian government, assassinating several key political leaders, including the prime minister, who was from the north. The coup leaders claimed they wanted to end corruption and establish a more unified nation. However, because many of the victims were northern and western leaders, the coup was perceived by many as an Igbo power grab. The situation escalated dramatically. 6 months later, in July 1966, a counter-coup was launched by northern officers. This was far more brutal. It led to the rise of Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, a northerner, as the new head of state. Following this counter-coup, a wave of horrific violence was unleashed against Igbo people living in the northern region. Thousands were killed, and millions fled back to their ancestral homeland in the southeast. These tragic events created a massive refugee crisis and shattered the trust between the Igbo and the rest of Nigeria. The Igbo people felt they were no longer safe within the Nigerian Federation. Their leaders believed that the only way to guarantee their survival and self-determination was to create their own country. In response to the crisis, Yakubu Gowon's government decided to restructure Nigeria from 4 regions into 12 states. This move was strategic. It aimed to break up the regional power blocks and, crucially, it split the rich Niger Delta away from the Igbo-dominated eastern region. This meant that if the East seceded, it would lose control of the vast oil reserves that were just beginning to be exploited. But for the leaders in the East, this was the final straw. On May 30, 1967, the military governor of the eastern region, Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu, declared the independence of the Republic of Biafra. The name Biafra came from the Bight of Biafra, the body of water along the region's coast. The declaration was met with jubilation in the East, but the Nigerian federal government saw it as an act of rebellion. Gowon declared that Nigeria would not be divided. The stage was set for war. On July 6, 1967, the Nigerian federal troops launched what they called a police action to retake the secessionist territory. They expected a quick victory, but they severely underestimated the Biafran resolve. What was supposed to take a few weeks turned into a brutal, 30-month-long conflict. The Biafran forces, though initially enthusiastic, were outgunned and outnumbered. The Nigerian Federal Army had the backing of major world powers like the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union, who supplied them with weapons and support. They saw Nigeria's unity as crucial for regional stability and their own economic interests. Biafra, on the other hand, received limited support. Only a handful of countries officially recognized it. However, they gained immense international sympathy through a brilliant propaganda campaign. They highlighted the suffering of their people, framing the war as a fight for survival against a genocidal enemy. Images of starving children with bloated bellies were broadcast around the world, shocking the public and leading to one of the first major international humanitarian relief efforts, led by religious groups and NGOs. One of the most effective and devastating strategies used by the Nigerian government was a complete blockade of Biafra. They cut off all land, sea, and air access. This prevented food, medicine, and weapons from getting in. The goal was to starve the rebellion into submission. The consequences were catastrophic. The blockade led to widespread famine. The region, once a food basket, could no longer feed its people. Protein deficiency diseases like kwashiorkor became rampant, especially among children. It is estimated that between 1 and 2 million people, mostly civilians, died from starvation, disease, and the direct effects of combat. The suffering was immense and became the defining image of the war for the outside world. Despite the odds, the Biafrans fought fiercely. They were resourceful, creating homemade weapons and refining their own fuel in makeshift refineries. The war saw intense battles for control of key cities like Port Harcourt, Calabar, and the Biafran capital, Enugu. For a while, the Biafrans even launched a daring offensive into Nigeria's Midwestern region, but they were eventually pushed back. As the war dragged on, the federal forces slowly but surely tightened their grip. They captured Biafra's major towns and oil fields, squeezing the secessionist state into a smaller and smaller landlocked territory. The humanitarian crisis worsened with each passing day. Relief flights, often flying in at night under the threat of being shot down, were the only lifeline for the starving population, but they could never bring in enough supplies. By late 1969, the situation in Biafra was hopeless. The territory had shrunk to a tiny enclave, the army was in disarray, and the people were exhausted and starving. On January 11, 1970, Iyuku fled into exile, and his deputy, Philip Effiong, was left to handle the surrender. On January 15, 1970, Effiong officially announced the surrender of Biafra to the Nigerian federal government. The war was over. In his surrender speech, he called for an end to the bloodshed and for all to work towards building a new Nigeria. In the aftermath, Yakubu Gowon made a famous speech declaring no victor, no vanquished. He announced a policy of reconciliation, reconstruction, and rehabilitation. The goal was to reintegrate the Igbo people back into Nigeria and rebuild the war-torn areas. The government avoided mass trials for treason and instead focused on moving forward. However, the reality of post-war reintegration was complex. While the policy sounded noble, its implementation was flawed. For example, every Igbo person, regardless of how much money they had in the bank before the war, was given only 20 Nigerian pounds. This was a devastating blow that wiped out the savings of an entire generation and severely hindered their economic recovery. Many also found it difficult to reclaim their properties and jobs in other parts of the country. The Nigerian Civil War left a profound and lasting legacy. The scars are not just physical but also psychological and political. The war solidified the power of the central military government, which would rule Nigeria for many years to come. It also entrenched the importance of controlling the nation's oil wealth, which became central to Nigerian politics. For the Igbo people, the war remains a deeply traumatic memory, a story of loss and survival passed down through generations. While Nigeria has remained one country, the sense of grievance and marginalization has not completely disappeared. In recent years, there has been a resurgence of secessionist sentiment in the southeast, with groups like the indigenous people of Biafra, or IPOB, calling for the restoration of an independent Biafran state. This shows that the questions of identity, equity, and national unity that fueled the war are still relevant in Nigeria today. The story of the Nigerian Civil War is a powerful reminder of how quickly a nation can descend into conflict, the devastating human cost of war, and the long and difficult journey of healing and reconciliation. It's a crucial chapter in Nigeria's history that continues to shape its present and future. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into a critical moment in African history. Understanding the past is key to building a better future. If you found this video informative, Please give it a like, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.